Hello and welcome to episode 468 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR, and we are coming off of the narratives never stop kind of week. It's so wild. It's like these people are almost trolling me, and I'm just trying to do some jokes, and they won't stop. I mean, yes, we had the original narratives, the shower narrative, of course, quarterbacks and wide receivers who showered together in college likely have better efficiency, and the wide receiver has an inflated target share. You know, that one blew up massively. Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Derek Carr, Devonta Adams. I mean, so wild. Fucking ESPN started talking about this, the shower narrative, during the draft. It went full-blown mainstream. And then, of course, we had the Bible narrative. The story, of course, is that these very religious quarterbacks, they tweet, Austin 3:16 or Psalm 69 420 or whatever constantly. They go to Bible study. They invite their teammates. Some go to Bible study, some don't. And this one was legit. In Philly, it was widely speculated that Carson Wentz was turning people off. He was getting too close of a bond with his fellow Bible bros. It was creating a problem. And maybe in Indy too for Wentz, and maybe in Washington too. And the same thing with Russell Wilson. Big time Bible narrative there. I mean, you just saw Jerry Jeudy pop off for a huge target share game in his first start with Brett Rippon. Jeudy, of course, famously not religious, actually wears a Jewish star necklace, not because he's Jewish, but because people call him Jew, short for Judy. I mean, so ridiculous. But anyways, we've had plenty of other ones. Everyone knows the PSM. We had the nearly die together narrative after it was revealed that Derek Carr and Devonta Adams nearly died in each other's arms while whitewater rafting. We had the divorce narrative recently with Tom Brady. We've had so many more, I honestly can't remember. But then in the last week, people are just sending me more of them. After the game Sunday, in which Juju Smith-Schuster went off again, and by the way, I can't believe I almost took the L on Juju Smith-Schuster a couple weeks ago. I'm such a donkey. I am rescinding that L that I took. Anyways, after the game, Juju says that he has been playing Call of Duty Warzone with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And that Call of Duty Warzone, that was the difference in their chemistry lately. I mean, I've honestly never played Call of Duty for 1 second in my entire life. I assume it's some kind of first-person shooter zombie killing thing, but whatever, Call of Duty narrative, book it. And then last week, the most ridiculous one, last week, after the Christian McCaffrey trade, report comes out, the exact line from the article, McCaffrey, and I'm quoting this, McCaffrey will be reunited with Kyle Shanahan, who reportedly babysat when Kyle Shanahan's father, Mike, was the Broncos head coach in the late 90s, and Ed McCaffrey was a wide receiver there. So now we have the babysitter narrative with CMC. I mean, Kyle Shanahan was in there changing Christian McCaffrey's diapers. You do not do that and then not give the dude 30 touches a game. I mean, come on. So there's been a ton more funny ones lately. I honestly can't remember them all, like I said, but it's so good. I love it. I want to spend a minute here on late swap and late swapping in DFS because I think it's a really interesting and deep concept and discussion. For those of you who don't know, by the way, when I say late swap, I'm referring to the ability on DraftKings or FanDuel to change your DFS lineup after initial lock with guys who haven't played yet. I think a lot of people out there probably assume that late swap is only used for injury-related stuff, but it's not. I mean, you can use it for anything. Let me start by saying a few things. First, I am far, far, far from a late swap expert. It's not really where I think my edge is or what I'm good at. It's a lot of the game theory stuff. I'm just hoping by bringing this up, I guess I hope that people think about it themselves and come up with their own ideas as well. Second, my take is that I never swap ever, almost never, in cash head-to-heads unless I am 100% certain of what my opponent has. Because let's say, you're playing a head-to-head, you get off to a bit of a bad start, but you have 6 guys left, and you just assume your opponent is also on team play the best plays. I think that's a massive mistake. There are a lot of sick fucks out there. These animals will show up with literally anything, and I'll just make them prove it. Make them prove that they have Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, and Austin Eckler. I refuse to just assume that they have it. Now, I'll talk in a minute about spots where you can swap in head-to-head. Third thing that I say, the public is massively under-swapping, not swapping enough in tournaments. It's just so clear. Like even a mediocre start at 1 p.m., if you're going for first place and not a min cash, you should be swapping to high leverage options. I feel good about those two takes. I almost never swap in head-to-heads for cash. And generally speaking, everyone is under swapping in tournaments. I feel good about those takes. Discussions beyond that are more complicated. Now, should you swap in other kinds of cash, not head to head? So, well, let me say one more thing about head to head. So I will swap in head to head if I'm blocked, right? In other words, both of us only have 2 guys left. I go in, I look at the salary he has left, the positions he has left. I figure out that he has the exact same 2 guys as me. Of course, I'm blocked. I have to swap. Of course. To know that, I have to go into each game and check. So I start with the highest stakes and work my way down around like 3:30, 3:45 p.m. Eastern each Sunday. I think that's easy and a no-brainer. The more complicated discussion is, should you be swapping in double ups or 50-50s? And this is super nuanced. And that's because even knowing if you should swap at all is a big decision in itself and not an easy one. I know everyone just wants a simple rule to use. Oh, if I take a 10 from Lamar Jackson, definitely swap. If I take a 0 from Romeo Dobbs, definitely swap. It's just not going to be like that. It's way more complicated. And one of the reasons it is because every contest is different. So, for example, in week 7, this past week, in the $25 single entry double up, again, in the $25 single entry double up, let's take the team that I played. You can read about it on the site in the free cash lineup review. But anyways, at 1 p.m., I took a 0 from Romeo Dobbs. I had CeeDee Lamb. He didn't have a great game. T. Higgins was fine, but not great. And Kate Otten was solid with a 10. Should I be swapping in 50-50s and double ups? Well, that depends. Again, let me be clear. In the $25 single entry double up, Joe Burrow was 20% owned. Obviously that's bad. 20% Joe Burrow. But Lamar Jackson, who absolutely flopped at 8K, was 13%. Also, a lot of people played Chris Godwin over T. Higgins. I played T. Higgins over Godwin. Godwin was 27% owned and T beat him. DJ Moore was great, but he was only 4%. That's almost irrelevant. Okay, so I'm drawing thin against the Joe Burrow teams, but some of them will be donkey Burrow teams that, these people have crazy stuff around Joe Burrow. I never assume that people will show up with what I think is right, because people show up with wild shit. I mean, in this contest, Amon-Ra St. Brown was 12%. I never even considered him. He scored 1 point. He got hurt. Alec Pierce, I never considered him either. He was 18%. And my biggest point, again, in assuming that everyone shows up with the quote unquote right plays, because we go to the 4 o'clock and Josh Jacobs, just an outrageously good play, was 81%. And yes, that's massive. 81% is massive. It also means 19% of the field just said, nah, wave on Josh Jacobs at 6,500 at home against the Texans. Kenneth Walker was 68% owned. And Austin Eckler against the Seahawks at 8,300, who I thought was a lock for cash. Well, he was only 36% owned. So again, people don't always show up with what I think is right. And then you also have all these people over swapping in cash, getting off Josh Jacobs, et cetera, leveling themselves. Now, I don't think that's happening very much in the $25 double up, but at high stakes, it likely is. Also this week, a lot of people started with DeAndre Carter, hoping Keenan Allen would be out. And there weren't really any good pivots at DeAndre Carter's price. And if Keenan had played the whole game, I legit think DeAndre Carter could have taken a 0. Kate Otten got 10 at 27% or so, making him a big favorite over Foster Moreau, who played late. So, and look, again, Burrow was 20%. If Burrow was 40% and had 40 points like he did, that's a different situation. But at 20%, it's different. So given my team and the situation in the $25 single entry double up, I do not think swapping was right. Now, I hope that I've done a good enough job helping people with their contest selection, finding the best games. The problem is that if you want to play cash for a lot of money and you're not me, a pseudo celebrity, people want to create a pseudo stir by playing me and beating me or whatever, so if you're not someone like me who gets a lot of head-to-head action, you maybe find yourself in smaller field, higher stakes double ups and 50-50s. And that's a different story. If there's 20 people in the contest and no donks, well, first thing I'd tell you is that you shouldn't be in that contest. But if you are, then yes, of course, you should be more aggressively swapping. But I think that most people listening to this, I suspect, are playing somewhere, if they're playing cash at all, I think they're playing between $20 and $500. And at those levels, you should absolutely be getting your money in very, very good games every single time. And in those very good soft cash games, I think, my take is that some people are over swapping because they just assume everyone's thinking like them. And that's super dangerous. I'd say one more thing about swapping. Again, it's hard. I already talked about how hard it is to know if you should swap in cash. But what about players to swap to? Like, I suspect a ton of people who are swapping are making bad swaps, like picking the wrong players to swap to and removing the wrong players from their lineup because it's complicated. I'm not sure that we have the right answer. So as an example, it's very possible and probably likely that many people, myself included, have made the right decision to swap, but still turned it into a negative EV move because the exact players were wrong. But we can get better at that. We can work on that and think about it more, which is why I wanted to bring it up. But again, think about the specific contest that you're in. Think about in tournaments, swapping more. Think about in cash, exactly where you're at, and try to figure it out. I know it's a complicated discussion. Anyway, quickly on non-late swap stuff. Cash this past week, I was pretty happy with how it went. I think I had the right team. I just needed to grow a dick and play DJ Moore over Romeo Dobbs like I knew I should have. I mean, we even talked about it last Tuesday on the team by team pods. Dobbs might be downright bad, and Sammy Watkins was back. And whatever you want to say about DJ Moore, even with how horrific his season has been, he still had a better projection on him. We still had a better projection on him than Romeo Dobbs. But really, the key was just locking into Eckler. Obviously, he got an absurd result, but I still think that was right. And, the situation and spot for him was so outrageous. As for tournaments, basically what you needed was the Joe Burrow stack with the cash game running backs. I did the GPP review show with Leone on Monday. If you're a subscriber, you can check that out on the site or on your premium pod feed. But yeah, I think the Burrow stuff was easy to get on. Getting the right guys around him was obviously hard. My best team was on FanDuel. I went Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I thought a lot about whether to bring it back with a Falcon or not. I decided that A, I don't trust Zach Taylor to be really throw-centric unless he's pushed by Atlanta putting up points. And B, if Joe Burrow has that 90th percentile outcome that I need to win the tournament, the Falcons will absolutely have to throw. So I decided to go with Drake London. Still think he's an elite talent and was really, really cheap on FanDuel. But man, was I wrong. Cincinnati threw at a ridiculously high rate despite leading the whole game by a pretty big number. And Atlanta, despite going down 21-0 on the first play of the second quarter, Marcus Mariota finishes with 13 pass attempts. The whole game, 13 pass attempts. In a game, they were down 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. So obviously London was dust and I was dust. I did have Ezekiel Elliott and Dallas defense correlation. Absolutely hate playing Zeke, obviously, but FanDuel, really all that matters is touchdowns. It's half PPR. There's no bonuses. You just need touchdowns. And so I thought a really good spot for Zeke to score multiple touchdowns here. Got that right. And then pairing him with Dallas's defense, the pass rush is just so absurdly good. My favorite play on this team actually didn't work out. I had Jonathan Taylor at $8,000 on FanDuel at just 8% owned. For those of you who don't play on FanDuel, typically $8K is very, very cheap. Like, it was not that long ago, maybe a month ago, Jonathan Taylor was $10,500. So I felt good about that play, even though it didn't work out. Also, I had Greg Dulcich here, Brandon Cooks. Definitely not the best team that I've made, but felt like it was a little live. Only got two things right, the Cincinnati stuff and the Dallas stuff, but that was enough for a little bit of a sweat. Not good enough, though. But again, for more on GPPs and what we can learn, check out the review show I did with Leone on Monday. All right, we need to get to listener questions, but before that, you need to know the NBA regular season is underway. NBA DFS and props is a very serious grind, but it's a grind where you can't just shoot from your gut. We have a full team of people working with Dink and Gallagher and Dank and the entire NBA team on the projections 24/7 for the next 6 months. So head to the subscribe page on the site and you'll see the link to all the NBA details. All right, enough is enough. Let's get to everyone's favorite portion of the program, the listener questions. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. All right, thanks so much to everyone for the questions. Got a ton of them, going to do 8 today. Question 1 from Justin Dew, old friend of the show. Actually grew up with Justin back in the churro days back in Fairfax. He says, do you have an opinion on the recreational use of erectile dysfunction drugs before there is a medical need? Is the enhancement worth the potential for a premature dependency on the drug? Great question, Justin. Great question. So if someone had experimented with these drugs, Viagra, Cialis, whatever, if a young male, perfectly healthy, say in their 20s, had tried it, here's what would happen, allegedly. First of all, you reach your full potential. If you previously thought that the max was the full 3.9 inches, 3.10 or 3.11 is well within the range of outcomes. There could almost be a stretching sensation, full-blown sword. But from what I've heard, of course, that's not the most valuable effect of these drugs. The most valuable aspect is, allegedly, of course, the most valuable aspect is maintaining that sword-like structure after climax. Yes, you heard that right. Your sword-like structure can sustain. Now, some people might get scared by this, freak out, call the doctor, do something embarrassing or drastic. Don't be that guy, get it together, play it cool. You're going to be fine. Anyways, what I just said, though, isn't the most interesting part of this discussion. The second part of Justin's question is worth investigating. And I'd actually add another aspect to it, which is this. If you do experiment with these drugs and you don't tell your partner, you have set the expectations real high. I mean, real high. So going forward, how are you going to explain this like wide variation in your POE, in your pumps over expectation? It could be up here and then next time falls off so dramatically. I mean, remember how disappointed the world was when they found out Lance Armstrong was using PEDs? It's a real concern. You got to think through that. Part two, Justin's question, can we get hooked on this? Can we get hooked on these drugs? Can we become dependent on a Viagra or Cialis, even though we don't need it? Another valid and major concern. Let's say there comes a day you actually need the drug. You actually need the Viagra, and it's ineffective because you were grinding it when you didn't need it. I mean, that's a disaster outcome. So look, I'm not a doctor. You got to make this call for yourself. Godspeed out there. Be careful. Question 2 from Brian Schultz. He says, as King GPP bro, have you been combating the domination of team play the best plays? Should we just capitulate and play the chalk every week? Yeah, so I got about 10 of these questions at least, all along similar lines. They were all, Adam, the best plays are crushing. Should we just start playing all the best plays in tournaments, regardless of ownership? I talked about this for a while on the solo pod 2 weeks ago, episode 458, starting around the 4-minute mark. My thoughts have not really changed, so go back and listen to that. One point I thought that was interesting that Leone made on that GPP review show, we can claim that people are getting sharper, projections are getting better, and therefore the high-owned plays are even stronger than before. And while maybe that's true, what's undoubtedly true is that one game of NFL football is just so incredibly variant and random. No matter how strong we are as fantasy players, there's still going to be chaos. And if you're a GPP bro, capitalizing on that chaos when it comes is the goal. So the point Leone made was, look, Josh Jacobs was 6,500 in week 7. I mean, ridiculously strong play. Leonard Fournette was also an insanely good play, I thought, but he was 7,700. So let's say DraftKings fucked up the pricing the other way. Like clearly they made a mistake and left Josh Jacobs too cheap. What if they had left Lenny at 6,500 and Jacobs was 7,700? I for sure would have played Leonard Fournette in cash. Leonard Fournette would have been 30+% owned in tournaments. And then he goes out and gets 4.6 DraftKings points, just a complete and utter failure. And we wouldn't even be having this conversation then, right? The GPP bros would not be in tears. And that stuff is going to happen. So no, the bottom line is generally, I think not playing 30 and 40% owned players in tournaments is right. Obviously, there's more nuance to it. Running backs are better chalk than any other position. You can play high owned players with unique pieces around it. Keep an eye on your sum ownership and your product ownership. Stacking create uniqueness. I know I joke a lot about the team play the best plays stuff, but trust me, the best plays are going to fail or be meh plenty of times the rest of the season. Question 3 from The Real Just. He says, can you please talk more about Levitan pod burps? Are these actual burps? Is this talking fast and being a little out of breath misunderstood? Are you actually eating a burrito before recording each podcast? The streets want to know. It's really so crazy. For those of you who aren't on Twitter, which if you're not on Twitter, you're not trying hard enough. But anyways, for those of you who aren't on Twitter, I'm minding my business last week and I get a notification that I have a new follower on Twitter. And the name of this new follower is Levitan Pod Burps. The avatar on this account is a picture of me making an ass clown YouTube thumbnail face. The description reads, your go-to resource for all of Adam Levitan's mid-podcast burps. And then all of the tweets from this account are timestamps of when he or she, whoever is running this account, the tweets are all just 35:24 in episode 464, Adam burps, with a link to the pod. So I actually went and listened to some of these spots that they flagged as burps, and they aren't burps. I mean, you can listen to yourself. I can't really describe it. It's like a lifetime of heartburn and eating too many carbs and too much sugar. And honestly, like when you talk like I'm talking now, I've been talking for, 20 minutes straight already. I need to like swallow at some point. And I know for a while people were calling it the swallow cast. If you guys try talking for 20 minutes straight, you're going to need to fucking swallow too, okay? So yeah, I'm sure this has something to do with all the white bread that I eat, all the white carbs, all the peach Snapples, but it's not burps. I wish it was a burp because maybe I'd feel better, but it's not. Regardless, I mean, imagine a world where someone takes the time to create this Twitter account, get the avatar, get everything right, go back and listen to all the pods, timestamp them for alleged burps. I mean, this guy's either a serial killer or a true legend. There's really not much room in between. Question 4 from The Real Just. He says, how do you dissect late news like Isaiah Pacheco is starting? If this was a Schefter report instead of a rap sheet report, would it have changed your process? I didn't consider Pacheco in cash, but spent the morning wondering if I should be taking advantage of the much needed salary relief. I'd say one-off reports are always worth flagging. In other words, no reporters from Kansas City were on this Pacheco report. Schefter wasn't on this Pacheco report. So that's always an antenna raiser for me to start. Next, I would be sure I read the report closely or listened to it closely and made sure that it made sense. If you read the Pacheco report, it said that, yes, the rookie would start, but CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, would still play plenty, and McKinnon was the odd man out. So the first part made sense to me. CH has not been very good for a long time. Pacheco has been explosive. But yeah, still the hot hand there. CH is still going to play. That part made sense. The part that didn't make sense was the McKinnon stuff. Very clearly, their best pass game running back, the one they trust there. So I didn't buy that as a one-off, uncorroborated report. In other words, although Pacheco was starting, it would still be this hot hand three-way committee in a brutal matchup. McKinnon was still going to play pass downs. So no, I never considered playing Pacheco. And we talked about that on this last-minute live stream. Hopefully you tuned in. Both Evan and I said that we still were not interested in Pacheco. Question 5 from Greg Andrews. He says, what real coaching sharps are left? One thing I'd say about coaching is that in-game decisions get all the publicity, all the blame, all the scrutiny, makes people lose their minds, myself included. And I get that. That's what's easiest to point out. To me, though, all the in-game decisions, that's an easily solvable thing. Hire some spreadsheet virgins from Yale or MIT or Stanford or wherever, give them a radio, tell them to tell the head coach what to do in game. And the head coach has to listen. When should you use a timeout? When should you go for it on 4th down? When should you kick a field goal? When should you go for 2? All this stuff is solved or close to it. Don't even think about it if you're the head coach. Just listen to the virgin in your ear. Because honestly, thinking through all that stuff while you're also managing the performance of 50-something 20-year-olds and a bunch of coaches, you're going through the emotions of a game, you're adjusting strategy, you're adapting to what the opponent is doing. I mean, I honestly don't for fucking up the time and score decision-making stuff. I do blame them for not hiring someone to handle it. That's just bad business, in my opinion. But I really do think a lot of the coaching in the NFL goes beyond what we see during games. Football is such a war. It's such a physically draining and emotional sport. How are coaches getting their guys ready to play? How are they getting them motivated? Is the scheme putting them in the best position to succeed? Are they adapting that scheme to your specific talent correctly? How does your scheme interact week to week with what other teams do scheme-wise and talent-wise week to week? So, yeah, I think clearly there's some very good coaches in the NFL. I think this whole cottage industry of just ripping on coaches and saying what they should do is pretty silly. Again, our job is to predict what they will do, not what they should do. It's irrelevant what they should do. I mean, who cares? Except for Cliff. He's a fucking donkey, and I can't help it. Question 6 from Lastif. He says, with the stock market price so low, is it negative EV to tie up money on season-long NBA, NHL futures instead of buying stocks post the next rate hike and midterm election results? Yeah, Lastif, I mean, this is a sick needle, man. I'd say this. I lost an unconscionable, incredible amount of money, quote unquote, investing over the last 1 to 2 years. And I don't mean paper gains. I don't want to hear whining from people who were invested majorly pre-mania, insane bull run, ran it up huge, and then round tripped it back to even. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking actual USD, turning it into investments, and sending that to zero. But honestly, I learned so much. The first thing, of course, is that fucking around, and I knew this at the time, but fucking around in spaces that I know nothing about is just a disaster. I just have no idea what's going on. I have no idea when to sell anything, why something's going up, why it's going down. I'm just not paying attention because it's not something that I do normally. It's just, I fuck around with it on the side, and that's just not going to cut it. So next cycle, I will be on the sidelines. Someone clip this and send it to me when the next bull mania run happens. I will be on the sidelines. I will be, of course, I'll be passively invested in the S&P 500 funds or whatever, but I'll be on the sidelines for the mania. And I get that's really easy to say now and hard to execute when everything is just going berserk and you see all these people getting rich, allegedly. it's hard to stay on the sidelines. But I think if I learned anything over this very expensive lesson over the last 1 to 2 years is that I just got to stick to what I know. Sex jokes on the internet and high stakes head-to-head NFL DFS games. That's it. That's it. Not fucking stocks, not fucking crypto. I'm basically the equivalent of a dude building DFS lineups on his phone while taking a shit, not building lineups on desktop like an alpha. So, as for Lasty's specific question about the EV, I have no idea. I have no idea if your EV on stocks is better than sports futures. If I knew that, I'd be rich and I wouldn't be doing fantasy football trade reaction videos from my fucking Honda Pilot at midnight on a Thursday, But the good news is that we have Strasser, our king. Hopefully you've caught Jason Strasser's guest spots on the show before. He's really incredible at explaining the finance stuff. And this is actually what he does. In other words, I have no idea what I'm talking about. It's not what I do. He actually runs his own options trading firm. So once NFL is over, hopefully Jason can find some time to come back on the show. Question 7 from Jacob. He says, what's a reasonable best ball advance rate, i.e. just advancing from regular season to first round of playoffs in week 15? So on Underdog, each 12-team league, the top 2 teams advance, goes to the next round. So if everyone was at the same skill level, you'd have a 16.6% chance of advancing. I think a good advance rate would be 20%. A great advance rate would be 25%, and mind-blowing would be 30%. But I'm really just guessing there. I'm just like pulling numbers out of my ass. I would hit up Justin Herzig, does a lot of the best ball work for us on the Battle Royale contest as well, the in-season Battle Royale stuff and all the off-season stuff. But yeah, Justin's so good at best ball. I'm sure he has better data to share with you there. All right, question 8. Last question we're going to do today comes from Sam Lockwood. He says, I split a power sweep with a buddy. Power sweep is the $150 buy-in 3-max. He says, instead of swapping Jacobs and MVS, he says, I split a power sweep with my buddy. He insisted on swapping Josh Jacobs and MVS for Breece Hall and Hunter Renfrow. Sent 10 texts about it. What is fair compensation here? Yeah, he swapped you off the winner. Death. I mean, you should be allowed to murder him. That's it. I think this highlights one of the reasons everyone needs to play their own money when gambling, or at least should play their own money when gambling. It's totally cool and great and fun to talk with your friends about fantasy and NFL and decisions and stuff like that. But when it comes time to actually play, it's just so much cleaner to play for yourself. You don't get into spots like Sam described above. You don't have these awkward tax situations and tons of other bad things that come up. And also, I note that backing is different than splitting. If I back someone or take a piece of them in poker or DFS or whatever, I'm not involved. I don't expect to be involved. I'm not making any decisions. I'm literally just investing in them and then leaving it alone. That's way different than saying, hey, let's chop this DFS buy-in and we'll make decisions together. Because then you get into some really awkward spots. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Solo Pod. I'll be back later today with Silva for the Team by Team Pods where we will recap everything we saw in week 7 and start looking ahead to week 8. Be sure you are subscribed on YouTube. Our goal is 30,000 subscribers before the end of NFL season, and we'd really appreciate if you guys can help us get there. For producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.